Harris with Varato. Today we have on the podcast Liz Jaikes from AccuStandard.
Hey there.
I've known Liz for a few years now. I've known the company that she works with for quite a while. On my agency side, we've been working with AccuStandard for a while. But they're a great example of a B2B business, and Liz is their web master, database administrator, all things web. We work with Liz on a regular basis, and they have a really, really interesting business and a great story. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Yeah. It's great to be here.
All right. So, Liz, tell us, we'll start with AccuStandard. It was started in 1986. So what do you know of anything about the background of AccuStandard?
Okay, so I joined AccuStandard about 5 years ago in summer 2020. I took over for the predecessor who you worked with.
Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine's great.
She's awesome.
And so I started working with you guys on day one. AccuStandard is a manufacturer of chemical reference standards. We were started in 1986, where Mike and Alice Bolgar founded the company. We had our original building in Science Park here in New Haven.
Okay.
And now we're at a new facility, but it's one building, about 80 employees. We've got a distributor network in 130 countries, and 85 of those countries we actually have an active distributor in. So it's a small family-owned and operated business, but we've got some pretty far reach.
So AccuStandard, the way I understand it, is that, well, let me explain it, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is that you guys sell chemical standards so that laboratories can test their equipment.
Yeah.
So, like, give me an example of something like that.
Okay, I've got a couple. So you want to test your water for the hottest thing now is PFAS, right? You want to test for PFAS in soil, water. We sell you this much of that PFAS, either in a solution, it comes in an ampule, and you use it to calibrate your testing equipment.
And you guys have customers all over the world.
We do. So like I said, 130 countries we're currently serving and ship to. Some of them we ship to directly. Other ones, if you look at the beautiful worldwide distributor page on our lovely website that you guys helped us make.
That's right. Find your distributor.
You can see if our distributor's in your country.
So the end clients are what? Typically laboratories, right?
Laboratories, some government organizations. We sell to universities. Right. We sometimes have partnerships with universities. We'll make something custom for them that they might not be able to find otherwise for research purposes.
And most of your customers are ordering over and over again, like they're...
Yeah, we have a lot of repeat customers. Orders. I'd say new customers tend to be, university students that are working on one specific project.
Okay.
Right?
So, I mean, this is a pure kind of business-to-business play. This is not like... you're not selling this stuff on Amazon. Let's just...
No,
right.
And we actually can't, right? We need to verify that it's a business address. We don't sell residential.
And this highly regulated, right? Because you're selling... Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
so it's okay. So it's highly regulated industry. It's pure B2B. And let's say been in business since 1986. The founder was a chemist, right?
Yeah.
Right. And your office is full of chemists.
Yeah. So what I do every day is I talk to programmers, I talk to you guys, I talk to chemists, I talk to management, and I try to get them to see the same thing.
And this, so that's the world. It's like chemists selling to chemists, typically, right? Laboratories, and in addition to the ampule, right? Did I say that right?
Yeah.
You have to give a document, right? Which is almost as important as the actual chemical sample.
Yeah,
right?
It's almost more important than the sample because that's what certifies that it is exactly what it is.
Right. So, like, the conditions in which you guys are producing your products is highly calibrated, right?
Yeah.
It has to be precise.
Yep, so we have a quality control department that tests that. We're highly regulated. We're ISO certified.
Right. And then so if you're sending samples off to test the equipment so that the equipment can be calibrated to detect lead or whatever it's looking for. You have to also know even more urgently that when you're sending the sample, it's right? Like,
that is the right thing,
right,
yeah.
yeah.
And so we do have like a technical service department that handles those kind of inquiries. In addition to our customer service department, we have quality assurance. So we really have people at every level that help support that.
Yeah. And then what I've learned through working with you guys is that there's the chemicals are separated into organics and inorganics.
Yeah.
So what do you know about that, if anything?
Now, just as a general disclaimer, I am not a chemist.
Okay.
I'm
not either. So.
I took chemistry in high school.
Yeah.
I work with some really smart people.
Right.
But organic and inorganic are very different. Kind of the way that the infrastructure runs in our ERP for each department is separate because
The labs are separate too.
Yeah, the labs are separate.
Right.
The infrastructure is separate, just because they're handled very differently,
Right.
and that buyer is usually different, right?
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we have some customers that buy from both sides, but we definitely have customers that lean one way or the other. And so when you think about it from an experience point, the thing that somebody that's looking for an inorganic standard tends to be looking for something differently than someone looking for an organic standard.
Okay.
And then we have the petrochemical industry as well, which is classified under the organic most of the time.
Right.
But again, that's a different buyer.
Right. And then you get into like petrochemicals, and then you get into plastics, and it's like, where is it no longer organic?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the big things that we do is we have categorization. We're heavy into working on our SEO, trying to make sure that things are where people can find them.
Right.
Because, again, we don't really have an upsell cycle, right? If you're looking to test for pesticides, you're probably not going to buy a PFAS standard unless you're looking for both.
Right.
So I can't sell you something you're not looking for. We just want to show up when people are looking for it.
We're looking for very specific things, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, exactly. So,
And then, so the owner, 1986, decides there's a market to sell chemical samples and chemical standards. And then obviously, like, this was before your time, but I'm assuming the business grew. And at some point, you know, the internet happens to all of us.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, information has to be online. So at some point, you guys get your, you know, it's before my time too, but I'm assuming you get your products, your business information online. And at some point, you decide, this was even before your time, but the market's going online. People want to be able to view what we have online, and we essentially need to have some kind of e-commerce option.
Yeah.
And so do you know anything about like how that evolved?
So what I do know is that we used to do very catalog based, right? Like our catalogs are huge, both like for the business and like if I brought the one just from 2018, it's about that big.
Right.
And so we moved from that to, I believe it was an online form.
Okay.
And just like a very simple like contact me form. And then I think at some point we were on WordPress, and when we talked to you guys, we started out like WordPress and open source Magento.
Yeah.
Is that sounding right?
This was a while back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was 2 sites, I believe.
Yeah.
And then we merged them. And then we were on Magento 1.
Yeah.
And then we went to Magento 2.
That was 2019.
Yeah,
right?
so and then now, But anyway, I think the platforms are kind of like whatever. Like, you know, Magento does what we needed to do really well. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
But also the back end, I think, interestingly, if you're a tech nerd, might be interesting to know, is FileMaker, right?
Yeah. So FileMaker is our ERP. We have, and you could call it bespoke or you could call it custom,
right.
But we have both in-house and we had some external developers at the time working to make this custom solution that really runs the whole business.
Right.
It does everything from ordering, payment processing, inventory, the weird chemistry stuff that I won't talk about.
Right.
But
also all the documentation, right? I mean, like at first, if you're doing the catalogs, that was coming out of FileMaker, right?
Yeah.
The data, at least, right?
Yeah. So a lot of that data is imported, exported today.
Right.
We have a semi-manual process for our catalogs. We like them to look really nice in our brochures.
Right.
But for the most part, we've been moving away from paper to the site.
Yeah.
It's just that's how people are finding it. Especially like come 2020, you had like death of the salesman.
Right.
And I'm not talking about the play.
Right. Yeah, COVID kind of moved the needle pretty quickly on a lot of this stuff. People were trending that way, and it's like, oh no, we have to do it now.
Yeah.
I think you saw a lot of disruption during that time.
And we've never been internally like very sales team heavy, right? We've been more on the customer service end, but I think a lot of our distributors, the way that they're using the catalogs has changed, the way that they're using the website has changed, and we've just seen a huge increase from customers as well.
Right.
Like I think when I started in 2020, we were around like 15 to 20% web orders, and it's now over half. So
wow.
Yeah, that's a huge increase.
I thought it would be more than half. Well, we'll have to move the needle on that one. So, okay, that's interesting. So people are still calling in their orders.
Yeah, yeah.
So also, like, let's get into the order flow. So this is so a lot of the podcasts will talk about digital transformation. You know, that's what you guys were going through. You're going from print catalogs to online ordering and online order flow and integration with back-end systems like FileMaker. Like we've done all of that, work over the last few years. But B2B is so much different than doing direct-to-consumer or B2C e-commerce. So can you get into some of the details? Like someone puts an order in, it's not as straightforward as just like, here's your credit card, like, we're going to send you this stuff. There has to be some checks and some back and forth. Can you explain that process?
So, I mean, before I was working at AccuStandard, I was doing Magento and BigCommerce for a D2C company. So when I first started in B2B, I was like, oh, I've done this before. Oh, this is very different. Very different. Very different.
Right.
So, again, like we have a complex process because not only are we regulated, not only are we B2B, but we also have some very complex shipping, right? Shipping chemicals.
Right.
So
regulated, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't quote shipping on the site at all. We don't quote taxes because that's very dependent on shipping. So normally what someone does is they actually submit an order request on our website. So it works the same way as if you were adding something to your cart, because one thing we wanted is we didn't want to have a ton of barriers for someone to place an order, even though we do have to validate that they're a legitimate business. Right.
So you can't just be sending this stuff to anybody. You have to know who you're sending it to.
Correct.
Right.
So it starts out on the website with an order request, and you can do that either with a pro forma request, which is basically asking for our team to do all the work for you before you actually provide payment information, right? This is done a lot for international customers that need to know the exact tax and shipping before they move forward. Or if you have, or you could just place the request, add your credit card, it goes through our payment gateway, it's tokenized, right? We don't see any of that. But
then they'll add a shipping fee after, right?
Yeah, so that comes on your order acknowledgement. Okay. You also, if you have existing terms with us, you might be able to check out with only a purchase order, so that's an option too.
Right.
But that only shows up like after the proper authorization has been added to the account.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, like you've tried to reduce friction in the order flow, but you have to maintain your business rules and the options, right? So customers can order one way or another way, and you've been able to engineer a system that kind of gives.
I think we've worked together on this.
I'm trying not to. Well, I mean, I shouldn't take credit for any of it. It's you and my team, and not to talk. This podcast is about businesses like yours. I don't want to make it about.
That's fair.
Harris Webworks, Varato, so. Part of get back to the mission of the podcast. You guys are a small business. Small. It's anyone under 500 employees is considered small. Yeah. Like you guys are a large small business. You're not a tiny business, but you're a decent size. But I think what would be a kind of typical regional niche business that's doing something a lot of people don't even know exists.
Yeah.
and it's fulfilling a need that is, that's very, very much present, and I would say probably a growing need.
Oh yeah.
But there's a lot of businesses that are out there that might be listening to this podcast that are thinking, we're dealing with some of these same struggles. We're dealing with some of the same friction. Like, we're having to think through, like, how do we take a sales rep print catalog paradigm of order and making it more automated, making it more self-service.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times, like, what we hear is, like, we can't do this. It's not like there's too many frictions. Our business model won't adapt to, like, online stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the message of Varato is, well, you can. You just have to kind of, like, don't do it all at once and go through it logically. Like, I think, and also one of the things that, like, we've been preaching, the podcast preaches, is that, for lack of a better term, digital transformation is not a destination. It's more of, like, a process, right?
A goalpost too, right? Like I would say, the way we're regulated and the way that we operate, we're always going to have a human touching at some point in the process, right? There's so many checks that we go through. The shipping changes so quickly that, at our scale, we have to have a human involved.
Right.
But that's not a reason to run away from the digital transformation, right? Like, we have a goalpost here of serving our customers digitally.
Right.
And, we don't necessarily want to do everything without a human either.
Right.
But the idea is, all right, we have all of these automation tools available. We have digital e-commerce available. And even if we can get here, can I, like,
Yeah.
like, how high up do I need to put my
Don't
hand?
worry about it. Just don't worry. There's 3 cameras. One of them will catch you. Don't sweat it.
So we have a goalpost over here, and the idea is that has everything that you need to be an automated digital e-commerce business. And even if we come from here to here, that's so much better than staying here, right? You don't always have to run the whole way. Yeah. And I think we're always trying to find a balance, because what we do best as a small business, right, is you want something and we find a way to get it, right? Once you get so big, you have to program all of these rules in for automation that you can't break.
Right.
And
then you're kind of, like, stuck.
Yeah.
You don't have that, like, agility. You've lost some agility.
Yeah. And so, my coworkers like to say AccuStandard lives for the exception, right? Like, we have a customer that says, I need the standard, I need to do it this way, and no, we can't violate the laws of chemistry. That's one thing we can't do. But what we can do is find a solution. If you want to, we have a custom quote request form on the website, right? And that's designed so that anybody can say, hey, I didn't find this on your site. I'd really like to do it. And there's some chemicals that you just can't dissolve in certain solutions. But what we do is we take your request, someone with a lot of experience reviews it and says, hey, we could technically do that, but it's better in acetonitrile than methanol, right?
Right.
We suggest this. Can you do it?
Right. So it's almost like a consulting service, too, at that point. Like, you're helping them solve their problems. Yeah.
Yeah. So
hence the hands-on approach. Like,
right?
like, you need a chemist or someone with experience to look at that.
And I think a lot of where technology is going is finding that balance, right? Like, we talk about the advent of AI and how things are getting more automated, how machine learning, and there's a balance, right? Like, AI is going to help somebody who, is brand new only if it's trained on the knowledge of someone who has that knowledge. And, it might make that person with all of that knowledge's day incrementally better, but not to the same increment as for the new user. And there are certain things you can automate that would work in the opposite direction, right? And it's finding that balance for everybody and what, like, increases that for your company.
It's still human beings on each side of the equation, and then it's still about, like, putting your customers first. It's still about relationships. It's not. I don't think that's necessarily gonna go away. I hope it doesn't.
No,
but it's basically listening. Like, we were talking on the phone the other day, and it's like a lot of tech companies and tech agencies like mine And even like directors of IT, tech, people, they focus too much on the solution instead of like focusing on the problem. Like where is our customers are getting back to us and they're telling us that you could make my life easier if you did X, Y, and Z. So why are we focused on something else? Right? So I think that kind of, and I don't think robots are going to take that away. Maybe they can do by crunching human feedback, but anyway.
But you still need the humans to input the feedback, right?
That's right.
Like one of the most important things we did in the past 2 years for the website, in my opinion, is we put a feedback survey in post that order request submission, right? And we get a lot of people saying, well, I haven't received my order yet, so I can't tell you. But we get a lot of good, this is how we use the website feedback from it.
It's like the Amazon reviews on a product where they're like, well, it was late. And you're like, but that's not the product's fault.
I get where they're coming from, right? Like, could we theoretically email them 3 weeks after their shipment goes out, or 2 weeks, Yeah, but we really want to know what you needed on the website, so we want to do it while it's top of mind, right? So one of the things I've learned is other people have different priorities than me from that form, right? But a lot of the other things that we put in last year were based solely on that customer feedback. We did a huge theme update last February, right? And the biggest thing we heard from customers, especially our distributors, was, hey, the site looks good, but thank you so much for not moving all the buttons I use every day.
That's right.
And personally, that's my pet peeve. When I have something that's a repetitive action that I do every day and all of a sudden the button moves, well, there goes my productivity, right?
Yeah. And it's like
muscle memory.
It's frustration.
Yeah. So.
And then you guys also have the ability to do bulk order uploads too for some of the power buyers.
Yeah. So I think we have kind of a 200 item limit, just because that kind of gets close to certain business rules we have regarding shipping, regarding just size of your order. But it really helps our distributors, or even just somebody that reorders a lot of items routinely, right? Spreadsheet can be uploaded, or you can just copy and paste the list and it adds it to cart for you.
Yeah. And how do you think you guys, in the last 4 years, 5 years, I think there's been a lot of disruptions in different industries. You were there the whole time, right? During COVID.
Yeah, I started June 2020, so.
Right, so right before.
Yeah, so my interview process is very interesting, right?
Yeah. So, I guess it had already started, right? Because it started in February, I guess, 2020.
March 26th is kind of when Connecticut closed down as far as businesses, right?
Yeah.
So,
I remember the NBA shut down. I remember, the NBA was no one's playing any basketball tonight. Not that I'm a big fan of the NBA, but I just remember, that's serious. Yeah, that was March. And,
I was doing the nerdiest thing possible the weekend before. I was in Long Island for a fountain pen show. And I remember 2 days before the show, they were like, hey, we're going to have tons of hand sanitizer, we're wearing masks. It was a Sunday. We were driving back that Sunday.
Yeah.
And as we're getting on to 95, the announcement goes out that they're shutting down New York State.
Wow, that's such a crazy time.
Yeah.
So how did you guys fare? Now, I think it's all behind us mostly. It's kind of we're now adjusting to a new normal. But how did you guys come out of COVID? Were you guys okay?
I think we did really well.
Yeah.
I think on some hand, right, supply chain disruptions are huge for us, right? Raw materials are a big part of our business. We do have in-house synthesis, so that helps with some of that as well. But so on the supply chain end, it was challenging. And then you think about having laboratories on site, right? You can't have somebody work from home in a lab.
Yeah, you guys closed down, right? Or no, you didn't.
We closed down for some time.
Of it, you had an
but we also moved into a split shift schedule. And,
because you guys were considered whatever it was,
essential business.
An essential business, right?
Yeah, because we provide to others.
But a lot of the office staff worked from home. I remember that. Yeah. People got through, man. They muddled through.
Yeah.
But the point being is now 2025, you guys are, are you seeing growth? Are you guys seeing like you guys are continuing to kind of thrive and grow and you're keeping busy and it's all,
like I said, we've definitely we've seen the web increase. It's been huge, like 20 to 50%. I know for some people, especially retail, that seems tiny, right?
Yeah.
But when we were talking 2023, only 15% of our traffic was mobile, right? You got to remember our clients are either working in a government office, in a university, in a lab. Because we only sell to businesses, people are only looking at the site from their office computer or desktop most of the time.
Right.
A lot of our customers are also highly regulated, right? So sometimes that means that
they can't even have a phone in the office, maybe.
Yeah. Or just other challenges.
Right.
We do have some customers that will only purchase with prepaid credit cards that are authorized for the exact amount because they have to have those authorizations on their end, and it's very strict.
Right.
So it's kind of, we're in an industry that's a little bit more slow moving because of the complexity.
Right.
So seeing that jump from 20 to 50% was huge. I think luckily we had just replatformed to M2 right before everything shut down, so we were kind of in the best position possible.
Yeah.
Like I said, some supply chain issues, some other things we definitely had to navigate. Sometimes we would have one side of the sales go down, but the other side go up a little bit. So it kind of helps that we have a really diverse catalog.
Yeah. And then what are you focused on now moving forward to kind of wrap it up? What can we do? Well, no, I won't phrase it that way. So yeah, what's on the horizon for you guys?
Cybersecurity is big for us, right? I think just with the advent of the things that are coming on the cybersecurity front, we're definitely paying attention. And then the other main thing is just trying to improve the order workflow for our customer, right?
Yeah.
We have some natural friction points just revolved around the business, but we try and ease that friction as much as possible. We try to be as responsive as possible.
Yeah.
So,
but it looks like things are trending in the positive direction, and we're getting more towards more and more people using the website, but I think it's smart that you're not making them do it, right? It's their choice. They're opting into it, and that's,
Yeah, we have people call in. We also do take some orders by email, right? Especially existing relationships. Yeah.
You don't have faxes, do you?
We do.
You still get fax orders.
I think people still do fax in orders.
I love it. That's so great.
I think it's one of the more rare ones.
Yeah. I heard this story once. I'll end it on this, which I think is kind of funny because I like to talk about evolution of technologies. There's some story where Dolly Parton, the only way to communicate with her was a fax machine. And there was a young artist, she got her fax number and they started, this is a true story, and this wasn't that long ago, and they started sending faxes to each other as a way of corresponding.
A fax machine pen pal?
Yeah, a pen pal. And I was the idea of sending Dolly Parton a fax just makes I find that so funny.
It makes a lot of sense to me.
All right, Dolly Parton's fax machine. I think that's a great place to end it. Anything else to mention? Anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think I would just say thank you for doing this. I think Varato's a great way for people who are in industries that, we've gone to a couple of conferences and roundtables in the past year, and our B2B environment is usually very hesitant to speak.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to see, not just myself, but the other businesses and partners that you guys have come on here, open up a little bit, talk about their challenges, and in a way that, they have you that they're comfortable with you not sharing too much, right?
Yeah.
And just opening up a little bit, because that's rare to find.
That's good. I'm glad you said that. I think one of the things that I've learned, and that's listening to younger generation, is that there's a lot to be said for collaboration and all ships rising. There's no reason that you have to be so protective. Obviously, you have trade secrets and regulations, and there's obvious things that you have to not talk about. But we're all learning from each other. My true belief is that all of this knowledge and technology is essentially the sum of all of our efforts. It's really a derivative collective thing.
Yeah.
And so for people to think like, no, this is mine, or this is, I don't think that's necessarily true. But I think my part of the reason I wanted to do this Varato podcast is like to get information out to businesses like AccuStandard, or for other businesses to hear from.
Yeah.
Like businesses like AccuStandard, and basically to advocate for what's going to be very disruptive. I think it's been disruptive. It will continue to be disruptive. But I think the main point is that you don't have to, like you were saying, you don't have to break everything all at once. You don't have to necessarily sprint. You just kind of have to understand that this is a process that you stay engaged with.
Yeah.
Right? And that
we're always building.
We're always building, we're always improving, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's that simple, right? You don't have to like break everything that you've built and start over. That's not what we're advocating for.
No, it's you take what you have and you say, all right, how can I make it just a little bit better?
Exactly. Yeah, and you just do it every year. And I think about with that methodology, like where we've like come. Like my agency and AccuStandard, like it's completely, Yeah,
like if you look at the site even 5 years ago when I started and compare it to today, there's a lot different, and I think most of it's better. And that, that's not a comment on the past, that's a comment on continual improvement.
Yeah, and what we've been doing together. And like 20% order to 50% order throw, that's just like
that means we've done something right.
We've done something right, yeah. And we're meeting customer needs, and we're listening. Yeah. Which is also one of the key things. Like you guys are a prime example. Like, what did we do? We put a form up on the website so we could hear from people. Yeah. What do you want?
Yeah, and I think it shocks people when I reply sometimes. And I say, actually, we do have that feature.
And she's a real human being. Wow, this isn't a robot.
Yeah. I get back like, oh, I wasn't expecting a response. And some things get sent into the void, but I look at every single one of them.
That's good. Yeah. That's great. All right, cool. Thank you so much for coming, Liz Jaikes, AccuStandard. This is Matt Harris with Varato signing off. You can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search on Varato, Varato. We also have a YouTube channel and a website and events. So follow us. Follow Curious. That's my new tagline. I like it. I'm working on that one. All right, that's it. Thanks, guys.